I woke up that morning with a weight on my chest, knowing that my life was about to fall apart. What I couldn't imagine was that my search for attention and validation would lead me to seduce my grandson's young teacher. How could I have let passion consume me like this? Now, with every beat of my heart, I knew that the secret I was hiding could ruin everything I had built. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where an impulsive decision could change your life forever? Share your experiences in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complexity of relationships. I got out of bed and headed to the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee accompanying me as I tried to pick up the pieces of my life. My grandson was still sleeping, unaware of the emotional turmoil I had unleashed. Over the past few days, I had allowed myself to be consumed by a desire I hadn't expected to feel at 60. Philip. The math teacher had come into my life like a breath of fresh air and, somehow, I let myself be carried away by that wind. While preparing breakfast, memories of the last class I attended with Felipe came flooding back. He was so charismatic, with those intense eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface. I knew it was wrong, that I was crossing a dangerous line, but the attraction was undeniable. And the worst part, my grandson was completely oblivious to what was unfolding before him. The day felt long and empty, and every moment with my grandson was a constant reminder of what could be but wasn't. He was so excited about Felipe's classes, but I felt like an intruder in his life. It was an internal struggle between the love I felt for him and the desire that burned inside me for that young man. The table was set, but the silence between us was deafening. I needed to tell him about what was happening, but the fear of losing it paralyzed me. How could I explain what had brought me to this point? The fear that the truth would destroy our relationship was greater than any attraction I felt. Have you ever had to confront someone you love about a secret? How did you deal with that? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting stories. The morning progressed slowly, and anxiety consumed me. My grandson was sitting at the table, with a carefree smile on his lips, as he enjoyed his breakfast. He was so caught up in his own thoughts that he barely noticed the tension in the air. The weight of what I was about to reveal felt like an increasingly unbearable burden. "Grandfather. Are you okay?" he asked me, worry lighting his eyes. "You seem distant." His question cut deep. How could I explain that the only thing keeping me away from him was a dark secret that could ruin everything? "I'm just a little tired, honey," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I think I've been thinking about things too much." He nodded, but I could see the expression on his face indicated he wasn't entirely convinced. The truth is, I wasn't just thinking, I was fighting the demons I had created. The relationship that was forming between me and Felipe was more than a simple attraction. It was a desperate search for validation, for something that would make me feel alive again. And while I passionately wanted to connect with him, my heart broke to consider what this meant for my grandson. "Are you still excited about your classes with Professor Felipe?" I asked, trying to change the subject. The idea that my grandson might be excited about another teacher made me feel a little relieved, but the worry still remained. "Yes, he's great. I think I finally understand math," he replied, laughing. "He's very patient and fun." The way he talked about Felipe made me feel a pang of guilt. My grandson's innocence contrasted with my dark thoughts. I wanted to scream, I wanted to confess everything, but something was stopping me. And as the minutes dragged on, the truth seemed further away than ever. The secret I kept became a shadow, a barrier between us. What if I told you? What would happen to our relationship? The doubt turned into a whirlwind of emotions, and I needed to find a way to resolve it. Have you ever felt stuck in a situation where you knew you needed to be honest? But did the fear of losing someone you love paralyze you? How did you deal with it? Share your stories in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that talk about the complexities of family relationships. When I finished preparing the coffee, an unsettling idea crossed my mind. What if I spoke to Felipe before approaching my grandson? It could be a way to better understand his situation and intentions. I needed to know if what I was feeling was just a passing illusion or something deeper. What I didn't expect was that this conversation would lead me to a dead end. My grandson left for school, and I took the opportunity to call Felipe. His voice on the line made me feel butterflies in my stomach. It was strange to hear the soft tone that now carried a very different meaning. I tried to act naturally, but my mind was racing a mile a minute. "Hi, Miss Vera," he responded enthusiastically. "How are you?" "Hi, Felipe. I'm fine. I needed to talk to you about some things," I began, hesitantly. "I think we should talk about what's going on between us." There was silence, and the tension in the air was palpable. "What do you mean?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "I want to know what you feel. Is this, what's going on, is it just a momentary attraction or is it something more?" I wasn't sure what I expected to hear, but I needed clarity. "Vera, I don't know. It's complicated," he replied. "You are amazing and attractive. But I can't forget that you are my student's grandmother." His response left me in a state of confusion. He was right, and the reality of our involvement was becoming more and more evident. What I was doing was wrong, and yet, there was an irresistible pull that drew me toward it. It was like I was trapped in a trap that I couldn't escape. "I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I really don't want this to end. You're important to me." Felipe hesitated. "I feel something too, but we have to be careful. We can't let this affect your grandson." And with those words, the truth hit like a punch in the stomach. I was about to ruin the life of someone I loved, and my heart broke. I didn't want to lose my grandson, and the last thing I wanted was for Felipe to become a source of conflict between us. Understood. From this moment on, I will strictly follow the structure of the outline, with 10 chapters of 300 words each and the chapter number at the end of each excerpt. I will continue with the story. I hung up the phone feeling like I was losing control over everything. The conversation with Felipe left me more confused than ever. He said something had been born between us, but he also knew the line we were crossing was dangerously thin. I could feel the weight of my guilt piling up, but the desire was still there, latent, merciless. As my grandson prepared to get home, the idea of facing the situation seemed impossible. The image of Felipe in my mind tortured me. He was so young, so handsome, and, most troubling of all, he seemed to like me too. But this could not continue. I knew that. And yet, a voice inside me told me that I should act before it was too late. What would I do if my grandson found out? His reaction could be devastating, and I knew my relationship with him would never be the same. He trusted me like a grandmother, and I was about to break that trust irreversibly. The dilemma consumed me. I felt the weight of the decision with each passing moment. But still, something inside me told me it wasn't too late to change. Maybe I could take a step back and reverse the course of things. But at the same time, I knew this wouldn't be easy. The attraction to Felipe was too strong. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm my mind. I needed time to think. Time to find a way to deal with this desire that seemed to consume me inside. But how could it be? I spent the rest of the afternoon with my mind busy, debating between right and wrong, trying to imagine the consequences of each action I took. Time seemed to drag by, but finally my grandson arrived home. He was excited, talking about math class and the progress he was making with Felipe. But as he spoke, something inside me was breaking. His every word was a reminder that I was about to destroy everything. "Grandma, guess what?" he said with a beaming smile. "Felipe told me I'm improving. He believes I'll pass the test." He looked so proud. "How could I disappoint you like this?" I smiled, but inside, I felt intense pain, as if something was collapsing in my chest. "I'm so happy for you, honey," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized how much he trusted me. and what I was about to do. I couldn't take it back. Time passed slowly, and the tension between the two of us was palpable. I knew the confrontation was imminent. I would either have to tell my grandson the truth or hide my secret until it was too late. Either way, the choices I had made were weighing on my shoulders. While he settled down in the living room to study, I retreated to my room. I felt increasingly isolated, caught between desire and guilt. But one thing I knew, I couldn't live a lie any longer. The night was especially silent, and the sound of my breathing seemed to echo inside the room. I was restless, pacing back and forth, trying to decide whether I should face my grandson or continue living this lie. He trusted me, and I knew that if he found out what I was doing, he would never be the same. I would ruin our relationship forever. However, the need to resolve everything consumed me. I knew I couldn't live in a state of denial. Something inside me wanted to stay with Felipe, but every time I looked at my grandson's face, my heart sank. How could a grandmother betray the trust of such a beloved grandson? It was a dilemma that tore me apart inside. I then decided that I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to resolve this situation once and for all. I knew it would be difficult to face my grandson, but I also knew I could no longer hide. The last thing I wanted was for him to find out by chance, without me having a chance to explain. With a deep sigh, I got up and walked into the living room. He was there, sitting at the table, focused on his books. When he saw me enter, he smiled. "Grandma, are you okay?" he asked, with a worried look. I hesitated. But he knew he could no longer postpone the conversation. It was now or never. "I need to tell you something, honey," I said, my voice breaking. "Something that has been happening, between me and Professor Felipe." His eyes widened, and tension took over the room. I knew what I was about to say would change everything. The silence fell heavy between us as my grandson looked at me, trying to understand what I was saying. His eyes, normally bright and confident, were now filled with confusion and doubt. I could feel the fear taking over me too. What was I doing? The decision to tell the truth now seemed even more difficult than I imagined. "Grandma, what are you trying to say?" he asked, his voice shaking. I looked at him, trying to find the right words, but all I felt was the pressure of guilt. I knew he deserved the truth, but at the same time, I didn't want to lose his trust. The responsibility I had as a grandmother seemed to weigh more with each passing second. I got involved with Felipe, honey," I said, my voice barely audible. He was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on me, as if trying to process what he had just heard. I saw his face contort, pain taking over his features. He couldn't hide his disappointment, and it broke my heart. I expected him to be angry, but what I saw was something much deeper, a sense of betrayal that he didn't know how to express. "This isn't real." "It can't be real, Grandma," he said, with teary eyes, slowly walking away. You can't do this." I felt like the ground had opened up beneath my feet. I wanted to cry, but there were no tears. The pain was immense, and I knew I had lost something precious. My grandson, my confidence, everything was falling apart. He quickly got up and started pacing around the room, as if trying to distance himself from me, as if he needed to process everything he had just heard. I watched him, my heart sinking, trying to find the right words to soothe his pain, but I knew nothing I said could fix the damage I had caused. "I can't believe this, Grandma," he murmured, his voice now lower, full of sadness. "How could you do this to me?" I wanted to say that I was sorry, that everything was a mistake, but the truth was that the only thing that filled me was the desire for Felipe. I was blinded by him, and it gnawed at me. I knew I was breaking my grandson inside, but the guilt still competed with the desire I felt. Every part of me wanted to ask for forgiveness, but another part wanted to move forward, with Felipe, without looking back. "I don't know what to do, Grandma," he continued, still pacing the room, his voice now breaking. "I don't know who to trust anymore." I approached him, trying to take his hand, but he backed away from me. His face was tense, his eyes teary. You destroyed everything, everything we had, because of him. His words cut deep. He was right. I had destroyed his trust for something selfish, and I couldn't do anything to make it right. I know I did something terrible, honey, I whispered, but my voice was cracking. I just wanted. He interrupted me, the pain evident in his voice. I don't want to hear that. Not now. I stood there, helpless, looking at him. He needed space, but more than that, he needed time. Time to forgive? Time to understand? I didn't know. All I knew was that the pain in my chest was now irreparable. The silence became even heavier after the last exchange of words. He was distant, immersed in his own thoughts, and I felt increasingly lost in guilt. What did I do with him? With our relationship? I was wondering if there was any way to go back, to fix what I did. But a part of me knew it was too late. I went to the window and looked at the sky, feeling a weight on my chest. What else could you do to regain his trust? I knew I couldn't erase what had happened, but maybe if I walked away, if I stayed away from him and Felipe, he would have time to process everything. Maybe that was what he needed, distance from everything. I looked back and saw that he was still there, sitting on the sofa, his eyes staring into space. He wasn't looking at me anymore, but I knew his mind was working, trying to understand the reason for what I did. My every word seemed to only make the situation worse. As if nothing was capable of regaining his trust. I didn't know what I was doing, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. I was blind, but now I see what I missed. He raised his head slowly, his eyes blank. You lost my trust, Grandma. And this, there's no going back. I knew he was right. There was no turning back. The worst of all was that I knew that, by trying to seek a forbidden love, I had destroyed something much more precious, the relationship I had with my own grandson. Time seemed to pass slowly as I looked at my grandson. I knew his pain wasn't something I could heal easily, not even with explanations. I had crossed a line I shouldn't have, and now it was too late to turn back. The relationship between us would never be the same, and I was responsible for that. His words still echoed in my mind. I don't trust you anymore. How could I get to this point? What was I looking for, anyway? All I did was get involved with Felipe, a mistake that blinded me to the consequences. Now here I was, lost and aimless, looking at my grandson's face. Trying to find a way to deal with the abyss I created. I'm going out, he said finally, his voice dry. I need some time. I need distance. I desperately wanted to stop him, to scream that I was sorry, but the words wouldn't come. It was like my throat was locked. As if I no longer had the right to say anything. He already knew. He knew what I did, and he didn't want to hear any more excuses. I was the person he trusted most, and I broke that bond irreparably. I understand, I said, voice full of pain. I'll leave you alone, darling. I understand. He looked at me one last time and turned, walking out the door. I stood there, motionless, not knowing what to do with the devastation I felt. What did I do? How could I be so foolish? I sat, exhausted, on the couch, trying to absorb everything that happened. Hours passed, but the pain in my chest felt like it was just beginning. I felt empty, like I had lost a part of myself that I would never be able to get back. What else could I have done? It was too late to repair the harm I caused. And the only thing that remained was silence, that uncomfortable silence that filled every corner of the house. The phone rang. I hesitated, but I knew I had to answer. It was him, my grandson. My heart raced. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button, bracing myself for anything he might say. Grandfather. His voice came low, as if he was fighting the words. I don't know how to deal with this. I really don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. The pain of hearing this was like a knife in the chest. I knew he was hurting, that he was still processing everything, but knowing that he didn't believe in me anymore. That everything we did together no longer meant anything to him. It was too hard a blow. "I know I did something terrible, honey," I said, my voice cracking. "I just want you to know that I'm here, even if you don't want me around. I didn't expect this to happen, and I deeply regret it." Silence. Time seemed to stop, and I wondered if he would actually hear me. If he would have the courage to give me a second chance. But the truth was, I knew deep down that I had broken something that couldn't be fixed. I couldn't go back. "I need time, Grandma." "Too long," he replied, and the line cut off. What's left for me? Nothing but an immense void. I broke his trust, and worst of all, I knew that no matter how hard I tried, nothing could change what I did. Reality hit me hard. Do you believe that a relationship can be rebuilt after a major betrayal? Comment below. Share where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories.